Okay, and it looks like most people are have been able to join, so we'll get started. Um, Thank you so much for joining us for this Sappy Hour. My name is Tanya Brookers, and I am going to be moderating this session. Today, I'm speaking to you from the Treaty Territory number 29, also known as the Huron Tract. It is home to the communities of the Omjwanong First Nation, the Chippewas of Kettle and Stony Point First Nation, the Chippewas of the Thames First Nation, and the Oneida Nation of the Thames. There are also people joining us from all over Ontario who will be on the traditional lands of many different peoples, and we encourage you to get to know whose traditional lands you live and Atlas on, by going to www.whos.land/en. And that link is in the chat for anyone who is interested. I am very happy to welcome you to this Sappy Hour. In case you're not familiar with these events, a Sappy Hour is a play on the term happy hour and our Atlas mascot, the yellow-bellied sapsucker. Sappy Hours are an opportunity to relax and learn about the Atlas from presentations about different topics relating to this enormous project known as the Ontario Breeding Bird Atlas, aka the Atlas. There is also a chance for Atlas participants to get to know more about the project and to ask about any questions or anything you'd like to know about Atlasing in general from the Atlas team. Tonight, as we head into year 4 of this 5-year project, we are going to go over Atlasing basics and give everyone time to ask any questions and the current state of the project. If you have any questions about that or Atlasing generally, please do make sure that you ask them once we open up the floor for those. Please ask your questions by either putting them in the Zoom Q&A. If you're not sure where that is on your screen, there should be 3 dots at the bottom of your screen if you are joining via Zoom, and you can open up the Q&A that way. Or if you are on Facebook Live, you should be able to ask questions there as well. The recording of this event will be posted on the Breeding Bird Atlas YouTube channel. And now we're going to get started. Tonight's speakers are Kaylin Bumelis and Mike Burrell, the leaders of the Atlas. And again, they're going to be going over some Atlas basics. Take it away, Kaylin and Mike, please.
All right, great. Just give me a second, but thanks, Tanya, for that intro. I'm just going to share my screen here. All right, how are we doing? Perfect. Okay. Get my notes up here. Okay, so as Tanya said, we're going to talk tonight. Our theme is getting started with Atlas-3, and this is meant to be both a refresher for all of you who have been Atlasing already and an intro for those of you who may be new to the Atlas. And if you are new to the Atlas, a huge welcome. We need all the help we can get, so it's great to have some new folks aboard. We're going to cover things in about 20 minutes or so. 15 or 20 minutes is the presentation. And we're going to basically tell you all the things you need to know to get started or to remember about Atlas-3. So the Atlas, as we call it, is actually a partnership amongst 5 organizations. And these are the same 5 organizations that were partners in previous Atlases. So Birds Canada, Ontario Field Ornithologists, the Government of Ontario, Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry, Environment and Climate Change Canada, and Ontario Nature are our 5 partners. And there's hundreds and hundreds of folks that are volunteers with the Atlas collecting data. We have a whole host of people from these 5 organizations plus others that help out on various Atlas committees. And then we have a small handful of paid staff that work on the Atlas. Kaylin and I are the 2 main full-time staff, but we are lucky to have a couple helpers through the off-season. Right now we have Claire Atherton and Scott DeRocha helping us out. And then in the summertime, we expand our ranks a little bit with some seasonal field crews, which we're very excited to welcome in a few weeks. So as we've said, this is Atlas number 3. Atlas 1 took place from 1981 to 1985. And it was really an amazing first effort to map the distribution and status of Ontario's breeding bird species. Atlas-2 took place 20 years later and also took 5 years of data collection from 2001 to 2005. Atlas-2 was the first atlas in North America to make use of point counts, which are just standardized stationary surveys. But those point counts collected information on abundance information on top of the where sort of things that we were collecting in Atlas-1. So what was very exciting with that information about abundance, we were able to not only map where species were found, but we were also able to map the relative abundance across the province. So we've got a little bit here from Atlas-2. This is an excerpt from the book for the Purple Martin page, showing 2 of our main maps. The distribution map on the bottom shows where the species was found and different levels of breeding evidence. But it also shows where things changed. So those little black dots might be hard to see on your screen, but those little black dots are places where the species Purple Martin was not found in Atlas-2, but it was found in Atlas-1, so a place where they disappeared. And then there's a few of those little yellow dots, not nearly as many as the black dots. Those are places where the species was found in Atlas-2, but not Atlas-1. So we were able to really look at changes in distribution. And then with those point counts, we were able to also look at the relative abundance of where the most important places are for those species. So that brings us to Atlas-3. Atlas-3, we began our data collection in 2021, and we're planning on running it until 2025. So 5 years again, 20 years later. And we're very, very excited to be able to look at not only what's changed from Atlas-1 to 2, but now we're going to be able to look at what's changed from Atlas-2 to 3. And that includes not just changes in distribution, but we're going to be able to look at changes in abundance as well. So very exciting, huge project to map the distribution and abundance of Ontario's breeding birds. So I talked a little bit about how we were able to do some comparisons in from Atlas-1 to Atlas-2. This graph shows one of the big outcomes from that second atlas, which was which species have really declined and which species have increased. So the birds on the left with the blue bars, those are species that showed the greatest increase between the 2 atlas in terms of the number of atlas squares where they were found. So Canada goose was found in 1,000 more squares in Atlas-2 than Atlas-1. So in 20 years, an increase of 1,000 squares. On the right are the species that we're very concerned with after the end of Atlas-2. So these are the species who showed the biggest decline in the number of atlas squares. So things like common nighthawk and chimney swift and bank swallow were showing big declines. And a lot of these species, as an outcome from Atlas-2 data, a lot of these species that were showing big declines subsequently were listed as protected species under provincial and federal species at-risk legislation. Okay, I'm going to flip things over to Kaylin now.
Yeah, thanks so much, Mike. So the goals for Atlas-3, that's the 3rd Ontario Breeding Bird Atlas. So of course, like previous atlases, we want to determine and map the distribution and relative abundance of breeding birds of Ontario and compare to the previous atlases. So as Mike mentioned, the 1st and 2nd atlases both had, mapped the distribution. And then the 2nd atlas was the first one to have those point counts, which allowed us to determine relative abundance. So this will be our first atlas that lets us compare the relative abundances between atlases, which is really exciting. We also want to determine population size and compare to previous atlases. That is kind of similar to my last point about doing point counts this time around again. We want to gather data on breeding locations and abundance for significant species. So one really cool thing about the 3rd Ontario Breeding Bird Atlas is the ability to pin specific locations of species at risk or otherwise species of interest. So essentially, when you submit data, either through the app or the web portal, you can add a specific pin the same way you can on Google Maps or other things to say, this is exactly where I found this bird, this nest, whatever you may have found, which is really, really cool. It just allows us a finer scale of data collection, which is awesome. And we want to ensure the data is available for conservation projects. So to look at the effects of climate change, how protected areas are benefiting birds potentially, effects of forestry and land use changes, among other things. So the data is going to be open and available for those types of projects. Next slide, please. So the applications of data, just touched on this a little bit in the previous slide. So essentially, what can we do with this data that we have on the occurrence and relative abundance of bird species over time? So not only do we have this for this specific time period of 2021 to 25, but we can compare it back to the past two atlases. So what can we do with that data? Well, some examples are looking at the ecological role of protected areas, identification of protected areas. So, you know, are certain birds congregating in certain spaces that may be more important than others? Advice for protected area management. We can look at phenology. So, you know, when does the robin start singing? When do the robins start building their nest? When do they start having young, et cetera, et cetera? We can determine those different life stages and try to work in tandem with birds instead of against them. This data is used readily in COSERO and COSEWIC designations. So bird atlas data from the last atlas is still used in species at risk designations and recovery strategies. So it'll be great to have an update on this data for those purposes. It'll be used to identify critical habitat. So again, being able to pin those specific bird locations is going to be really important for those types of analyses. And then determining how much, or looking at how much habitat is enough, or relationships to ecological features as well. So next slide. So how do we do this? Obviously, Ontario is huge. It's a really, really big province, and a lot of it doesn't actually have roads, which makes things a little bit challenging for us. So what we've done is we've divvied up the province into 47 regions. So on the left-hand side of the screen, you could see the province of Ontario with the 47 regions. The one highlighted down in the bottom is the Hamilton region. I'm calling in from Hamilton today, so I've selected my home region there. And so that the map kind of on the right of that is the Hamilton region map with a square highlighted. So we divide the province up into regions and then into 10 by 10 kilometer squares, which is the final map at the bottom left-hand corner. That is a square map, which we use to show the different habitats in the square and the different point counts and so on. So of these 47 regions, we obviously don't necessarily want the same amount of survey effort, or we can't ask for the same amount of survey effort for all 47 regions because there are different numbers of people and different levels of accessibility in each region. So the darkest green in the map on the right-hand side is where we want 100% of squares to have 20 hours of atlasing and 25 point counts. So that what that means is 20 hours of atlasing is going out on a hike and birding and recording breeding evidence. We want 20 hours of that in that dark green in every single square, and 25 point counts, which Mike alluded to earlier, and I'll touch on a little bit more. And then in the lighter green, we only want 5% of squares to have that 20 hours and 25 point counts. And then in the lightest green, where there's no roads in the roadless north, we want 2% of squares to have the 20 hours and 25 point counts. We also have optional surveys that aim to address some gaps in coverage in terms of species that may be difficult to survey for in traditional surveys like point counts or general atlasing. So we have owl surveys, nightjar surveys, and marsh bird surveys to address those gaps. Next slide, please. So what is general atlasing? What is point counts? If you're coming to Intro to the Atlas, we obviously don't want to assume that you know what those are. So general atlasing is when you do a checklist, what we call a checklist. So you can go on a hike, as you can see in the little blue squiggle, that's supposed to represent going on a little hike and recording all the birds that you see in here, along with any breeding evidence that you observe. There's no predetermined locations. It can be stationary or traveling. It can be any duration, but we suggest that you do shorter checklists and more frequent checklists, just so that if you see an interesting bird, it's not attributed to, you know, a 10-kilometer long hike. And anyone can contribute at their level. So, you know, just to record the things that you can identify that you're seeing and hearing along with the breeding evidence. For point counts, so those numbered dots on the map there, they are done at predetermined locations. So they're randomly assigned at roadsides, and you record all the birds you see in here for a set amount of time, which is 5 minutes. And these require a little bit more advanced bird identification skills. or you can use a recording unit if you chat with your RC about it. Next slide, please. I think this might be yours now.
Yeah, thanks, Kaylin. Okay, I'm going to jump back in, and then you get to hear a little more from Kaylin later. So Kaylin alluded on that last slide to breeding evidence. And so a lot of folks that are on this call are probably very familiar with the idea of an eBird checklist, going out and doing exactly what Kaylin was describing. You know, you go for a hike and you record what birds did you encounter. Atlasing is very similar to that. The only real difference is we're asking you to also record another piece of information, which is the breeding evidence. And this is something that can scare people away because they see this chart and they see, oh my goodness, there's 20 different breeding codes. How am I ever going to memorize them? The good news is you don't need to. There's really only a small number of those 20 that you're going to use really frequently, and trust me, you'll memorize them very quickly. They're also, for the most part, really quite obvious. So the two most commonly used codes are the H and S codes. H stands for habitat, S stands for singing. So the H code we use when the bird is observed in suitable breeding habitat during its breeding season. So habitat, H, nice and straightforward. And S is a singing bird that you observe singing during the breeding season in suitable breeding habitat. So if you can memorize those two, you are all set to go out atlasing. You will inevitably get curious about these other codes and start using them. There's lots of resources to start using them. There's the coding sheet that you're seeing here. You can download that right from the Atlas website. And the really nice thing is if you are going to use our Nature Counts app, which is the app that we use and recommend for people that are going out atlasing, there's a whole bunch of tools that are built right into that app. So I'm going to show you some of them and show you what it looks like to gather information using our app. So the Nature Counts app is a Birds Canada product. It supports other projects, not just the Atlas, but the Atlas is a really important project that is supported by Nature Counts. So you're going to have to download it from the App Store or the Play Store, or what do they call the Apple App Store, Google Play Store. Those are the two. So you got to download it, nice and easy. You've probably done that a few times before with other apps. You'll need to log in with your Nature Counts username, which means you have to first register on the Atlas website. Once you've passed that, then it's very simple. The app is going to know where you are already with the GPS of your phone. It's going to also know what time it is and what day it is and all that good stuff. So it already does a lot of the work for you. And then it presents you a list of the birds that are likely in that area. And so this is very familiar to you folks who have used eBird before. It's very similar. Again, the difference really is that BE column. We're asking you to collect the breeding evidence. And again, you might find that really intimidating at first, but the good thing is you click on that BE spot and it's going to come up with a bunch of information that will help you make those decisions. So if you're when you open it up the first time, it's going to tell you whether or not you're in the breeding season or not for that species. So it gives you that bit of guidance. So you don't even need to memorize that. And then some of the codes will be color coded to give you certain warnings. So if we clicked on one of those yellow or red codes, it would give us some extra warning. If you don't know what all those letters mean, you can tap that little list view in the top right, and it's going to present you all those codes and all that information in a list format. So that list format now gives you a little bit of a tip on which those codes are. So if you had forgotten what H stood for, it'll now tell you, oh, H is habitat, S is singing. And then if you click on one of those little warning code, the little exclamation mark that's in yellow beside pair, for example, for this chickadee, it's going to tell you what the caution is. So in the case of the pair code for black-capped chickadee, it says cautions required. Caution, male and female are identical. Behavior clues are essential. So it's just giving you a little bit of caution if you're going to use that code. So it depends on the species, depends on the time of year, but all of that is built right into the app. So you really don't need to do a whole lot of memorization when it comes to those codes breeding seasons or anything like that if you're going to use the Nature Counts app. Now, when we are talking about eBird, it is possible for you to use eBird. If you're used to that and you're used to the eBird app, you can continue doing that and then import those checklists into Atlas-3. It's a manual process, so you have to import each checklist through the Atlas website. It's pretty straightforward though. On the web submission on the Atlas, you're going to use the option that says import from eBird. You need to copy and paste the eBird checklist ID. And then it pulls all that data from your eBird checklist, fills it into your Atlas checklist, and then we ask you to make sure you check those breeding evidence codes and Atlas specific flags, because those things, obviously, you weren't getting those things like the pair caution and things like that, and the breeding season cautions if you were submitting through eBird. The nice thing is if you're using the Nature Counts app, it tells you all that. Your other option, if you're an eBird user, is you can actually set the Nature Counts app or your Nature Counts account to push your Atlas data back to eBird, so you can go the other way. This is very handy. This is the option that I choose because it's automatic, so I don't need to do more than I have to. So in this case, you just go into your profile on the Nature Counts website, and you need to add your eBird login and your login credentials, your username and password. And then there's a little toggle to turn on the auto push to on. And once it's on, then all you need to do is submit your data through the Nature Counts app, and they automatically go straight to eBird. You don't have to do anything. So it's super, super handy. So if you want to explore those, head to our YouTube channel. We've got how-tos on all those things, how to set those things up and get you started going back and forth between eBird and the Atlas. All right, back over to you, Kaylin.
Yeah, it's me again. Okay, so there are lots of different ways to get involved depending on, I guess, the investment or time investment or, difficulty you're willing to take on with the project. There's opportunities for everyone, and that's one thing that I feel is really great about the Atlas project. And so this goes from, I would say, least difficult or least time intensive to more difficult and a little bit more time intensive. So the least difficult and or time intensive is just to make atlasing part of your regular birding activities. There is no minimum time investment here. You can really just bird at your own level, at your own pace, and just incorporate it into your hikes or your birding or your camping or anything that you're already doing. Just bust out the Nature Counts app and start recording some birds and breeding evidence for birds that you recognize. A step up from that would be to go atlasing in undersurveyed areas. I say this is a step up because it takes a little bit more targeted effort. You're not just going places that you're already going. Maybe you're looking for places that need a little bit of extra effort and deliberately going there. So it is a little bit of a step up in terms of having to do that targeted effort, but maybe take you to new places, which is really exciting. A step up from that is to talk to a regional coordinator about doing special surveys. So I mentioned earlier that there are the special surveys for owls, nightjars, and marsh birds. If you want to talk to your regional coordinator about doing those special surveys, some of them are a little bit more beginner friendly, like the owl surveys. There are fewer species that you might need to identify. Some of them require a little bit higher birding ID level, like the marsh bird surveys. So talk to your RCs about getting involved in those if you're interested. And then even more than that is joining a square bash. So square bashes are where we get together at provincial parks for the official Atlas square bashes, or in a particular square if it's at the regional level. And everyone gets together and goes birding together to try to blitz undersurveyed squares. So the square bashes that we're doing this year as part of the Atlas HQ are at Pinery, at Bon Echo, and at Nikasu. And there's more details on our website about those. I don't know if Mike wants to put a link in the chat to the Square Bashes webpage, but he might do that in a couple of minutes. So yeah, you get to come and camp and learn from each other and go atlasing in undersurveyed areas, which is a lot of fun. The next step up is to talk to your regional coordinator about doing point counts. So these are done at predetermined locations, as I mentioned earlier. If you have a higher level of bird ID by sight or by sound, you can do them that way. Or you can do them with a recording unit that later gets interpreted. So definitely talk to your RCs about doing those. And then the hardest, most difficult, time intensive, I would say, is taking part in one of the remote northern trips. We have all of our trippers scheduled for this year, but those folks sometimes take float planes into the remote north and do some canoe trips to get some surveying done up there. So it's a lot of fun, and more info is on our website about those as well. And Mike, oh, Tanya put the square bashes into the chat, so that's great. Thanks, Tanya. All right, next slide, please. So here is just kind of a screen grab from our kickoff and square bash map. And so this is showing some of the different kickoff events that are scheduled in the for this field season, and some square bashes. So for kickoffs, essentially, we just try to get together and do some mentoring and teaching about the Atlas and answering questions and that sort of thing in person. So the Atlas HQ, as we call it, is doing some events in the Ottawa area, so in Kemptville and in Barrie this upcoming weekend. And then you can see our square bashes on there as well. So keep an eye on our website for those kickoffs and for those square bash events. If you want to get together in person and learn more about the Atlas, this is a great opportunity to do so. Next slide. Okay, so this is a really important slide because I know Mike had mentioned our YouTube channel. We have so many tutorial videos on our YouTube channel, which I posted, oh, go back, which I posted the link to there. And so it's youtube.com/@onbirdatlas. All of our past Sappy hours are on there. We have tutorial videos on how to use the app, how to do point counts. We have a lot of quick start videos on there, which are really, really handy. Our website is birdsontario.org, and that QR code will link you directly to our quick start page on the Atlas website. And then finally, our email address, atlas@birdsontario.org, if you have any questions. Great, Mike also put the link to the YouTube in there. And for those on Facebook, I will copy those in just a moment, so stay tuned. And next slide. Great, now it's time for questions.
Great, thank you both. I'm sure that answered a lot of people's existing questions, but a couple have come in. Let's see, there's one from Catherine asking, are North America breeding bird survey data incorporated into the Atlas?
Yeah, good question. So they have not been yet, but they will be. And that goes for a few other projects too, things like Birds Canada led nocturnal owl surveys and Birds Canada marsh monitoring program. Those are all going to get rolled into the Atlas eventually, but we're going to do all that kind of at the end. So yes, they will be, but they're not currently in there.
Great. Okay, another question from Lois. According to the map, my house is in square 25, but on the app, my house is in square 26, and 25 starts in the middle of my next door neighbor's yard. Any guidance about how to record observations of birds along the border of squares? Square 25 is less reported, so I plan to do most of my reporting in square 25.
Yeah, we have some guidance in the Atlas manual about birding near square boundaries. I always like to tell people whenever they complain that they're on the border, I always say, well, you're extra lucky because you get to Atlas in 2 squares really easily. So yeah, you can choose which square you're in. You should record the birds where you are and try to get the birds that are in the square. So if you're walking along the edge and you see birds that are outside of the square, it's probably not that big a deal if they're going to go on one checklist or the other, because they're probably going to hop over that boundary once in a while. But it's best practice to make a separate list of those birds that are in that other square. But if you're really close, I'm sure that song sparrow is, if you stood there and watched it long enough, it's probably going to hop over the boundary. It is very handy if you're using the app to be able to see where you are in relation to those square boundaries. And one of the nice features of the app is it'll actually give you a little buzz and a little message if you leave the square you started your checklist in to remind you to either end your checklist and start a new one, or go back to that square.
Makes sense. Okay, a question from Darlene. What is the reason for the order of the difference between the order of checklists between the third and the second hour?
For the order of the checklist, I wonder if they mean just the checklist-based approach versus in last Atlas, it was kind of just okay, we've got the robin in the square and this is the highest breeding evidence we've seen to date. And if that's the case, if we get a lot more data this way, the checklist-based approach had become very popularized by eBird, as Mike had mentioned earlier. And so that was one of the reasons. It's something folks are really familiar with. But in addition to that, there are really neat things that we can glean from that, like phenology. So in terms of forestry or say agriculture, where you have birds nesting in places where we also need those resources, if we can get a sense of their phenology and when we can use the resources versus when the birds are there and the birds need those resources, then that's some really great information that we can glean from having more data at more times per year. I'm not sure if Mike wanted to add anything to that.
Yeah, I'll add one thing to that. So the checklist-based approach, if that's what we're talking about, then it really gives us just that much more information too. Like we didn't show it here, but the difference between the number of checklists we've received or the amount of data we've got at this point in Atlas-3 compared to Atlas-2 is like, I don't know, it's like an order of magnitude different. And I'll tell you, in my normal, when I'm not the Atlas coordinator, I do a lot of work on where rare species are found, and it's very frustrating, in fact, to go back and we're using Atlas-2 data, but a lot of the time we don't know where in a square something was. So with the checklist-based approach, we know at least a smaller area of where those rare species were. Back to that question, please clarify in the chat or the question if we're not on the right track. It's possible you were talking about the order of birds. So that we just follow the current taxonomy, the taxonomic order. So bird scientists, especially with genetics, they're finding out that relationships of birds is not exactly what we thought it was 20 years ago, and it's constantly changing. It's great news for bird field guides because they get to reprint and have the new order, and great way to confuse people with changing of orders of birds. But we try to follow that taxonomic order, and that's where the order comes from.
Great. Another question from Darlene is, are there any MNRF or Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry staff for Kenora District involved in surveying? I'm not sure if you know that information.
Yeah, the regional coordinators for that part of the province, actually, they're MNRF staff. They do it as a volunteer gig. And when the Atlas started, they were in that neck of the woods, but they have moved, but they've continued working as volunteers on that as regional coordinators. And I suspect, I don't know, Kaylin, you could maybe chime in there, but I'm pretty confident they've wrangled some MNRF staff to help out in their spare time as well.
Okay, and Darlene had some clarification just on the earlier question about the order of checklists. She just mentioned that loons came first in the checklist, and it might have thrown some birders who were familiar with the old order. So
yeah, okay, so yeah, that's the taxonomic order. Yeah, I know it felt like forever that loons were the first thing, and then sure enough, so the way the taxonomic order works is essentially it's the oldest species first, and then the newest species from an evolutionary perspective. So for a long time, we thought loons were the oldest group of birds that we had in Ontario, but as it turns out, ducks are older. So now ducks are at the front, and loons are further into the middle, and a lot of that is being updated, as I said, based on genetics. Our previous taxonomic work was mostly based on like physiology.
Okay, a question from D. Potter. How do we find out who the coordinator is for a particular region? I can answer that. So on the Atlas website, birdsontario.org, Mike needs to enable screen sharing. Sorry, you're the host now, Mike.
Okay. Let me see if I can figure out how to do that.
Next to share screen, there should be like a little arrow.
Okay, how's that?
Okay,
Does that work?
yeah, that looks great.
Okay.
Thanks.
Never done that before.
All right, yeah, first time for everything. Okay, yeah, you can see this okay, right? The Birds Ontario website.
Yep.
So this is the home screen of the Birds Ontario website. If you just go to birdsontario.org. If you go under Get Involved, there's a Contact Us page. And that will take you, I just did this ahead of time so that it would load quickly. It'll take you to everyone's email addresses. And if you zoom in on this map, you can see which region is which. I'm just going to zoom in on the Hamilton region. Again, that's where I'm from. If you click on the region, it'll tell you it's Region 15, Hamilton, and all those details. If you want to know who specifically it is, if you go to the Atlas and then Atlas team and regional coordinators, it'll take you to this lovely list that tells you all about the regional coordinators that are coordinating for the Atlas. This same map is on here. So again, if you just go to Region 1, it'll tell you, this contact information. But then you can see Region 1 is Karen and Paul who are coordinating that. So either one of those options is fine, depending on how much info you'd like.
Great, thanks, Kaylin. Just a reminder for everyone, if you have any additional questions, we still have time for more. Feel free to enter them into Q&A on Zoom or into the chat on Facebook. Let's see, another question here is, I've submitted a checklist to the app, but can't find where to go back and edit it. Where would someone do that?
I can answer this one too. So I'll just share screen again here. If you have submitted something through the app, it's kind of like eBird was, I don't know how long ago, but when you used to be able to submit something through the eBird app and then have to edit it on the web, we're still in that same stage right now. So you can submit stuff through the app, but if you need to edit it, you need to edit it through the Nature Counts web portal. So how you get to the Nature Counts web portal is by going to birdsontario.org again, and there's a login button in the top left corner. So I would go ahead and press that and log in. I'm going to log in as me. So that will take you to the Ontario Breeding Bird Atlas main page. You can go to My Data in the top right corner, and you can view your data forms. And this is a list of all of your data forms. If you just want it to be the most recent one, you can either press the edit button, or if you want to view it, you're not entirely sure if this is the one you want to edit or not, you can take a look at it by pressing the magnifying glass. And then you can either change the site or effort, or you can change the species list. The site or effort will just be, the duration, the time, date. This is a point count in March, so I probably want to change that because you can't do point counts that early. Or you can change the species list, either one, whichever you're looking to do. You can share it with eBird. I haven't shared that list yet, but that's another feature Mike was talking about earlier. So I'm not going to go through the process of editing it, but that's where you find it if you're looking for it.
Okay. Question from Lois. Are we starting now to record breeding evidence? I saw some baby geese today.
Yeah, we are definitely. And you can record breeding evidence any time of the year. It's pretty amazing. In the middle of January, you can find some birds already exhibiting breeding evidence. So it doesn't have to be like that definitive proof, like a baby goose or a bird sitting on a nest. There's other kinds of breeding evidence, like a bird displaying or like maintaining a territory or a bird in suitable habitat. And so that's why it's real handy if you're using the app. It'll pop up there, like I showed the dates. So if you start a checklist January 1st, almost everything, when you go to try to put in breeding evidence, it'll say, oh, you're outside of the breeding season, so don't enter anything. But there's a few species like great horned owl or eastern screech owl or rock pigeon. If you're in southern Ontario, it'll say, yep, all good. You're in the breeding season. You can go ahead and enter breeding evidence. So if I saw a screech owl on January 1st, in Toronto, I could put that in with breeding evidence. So absolutely, we're seeing lots of stuff starting to ramp up now. And some stuff like geese and some of the like bald eagles and great horned owls, they've already got nests, young in the nest, or in the case of the goose, young out of the nest.
Okay, another question from Darlene. I printed a checklist for the third atlas, but can I enter data on my laptop to a checklist and save to my files? So that might just be a specific case of something that you were showing earlier, Kaylin, of the how to edit checklists on the website.
I don't think there's a download feature right now for downloading your lists once you've submitted them. I know that that's currently a feature on eBird, but something that we've discussed with Nature Counts, but isn't currently available.
Okay. A question from Sandra. Do you expect that our unusual early spring will affect breeding time significantly? If so, would you expect any species to be affected more than others?
Sorry. Yeah. I was just trying to do two things at once. I absolutely think that, well, I know that the early season is affecting different birds. So that goose, who was it that reported the goose? The goose is a good example. It's pretty early. I always think of seeing my first goslings out of the nest the first week of May. So we're 2 weeks early. And I've been hearing about goose out of the nest for a couple weeks now in southwestern Ontario. So it's definitely impacting some birds. The birds that it's probably going to impact the most in terms of their shifting their timing are the early species, the species that are nesting in like February, March, April. It probably won't impact the species that are going to arrive back in May as much, because those birds have no idea that it's been nice and warm here. They're probably still sipping margaritas on a beach in Mexico or Brazil or something. So they might be starting their way back now, but they don't realize, they have no way to know that it's been an early spring. Whereas those red-winged blackbirds and the song sparrows and the Canada geese, they've been back here for a while and had that opportunity to get started earlier than they might normally have done.
Makes sense. Question from Helen. Any hints on settings for my TELUS iPhone so that it doesn't bounce off towers and add odd triangles to my route on Nature Counts? I'm in Muskoka where signals can be iffy.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I guess one question I would have for Helen is whether or not she's tried the app more recently. Because in recent updates to the app, there's a new feature that's been incorporated where you can adjust the accuracy of your track. So you can kind of slide it back and forth depending on how many jumps there might be between towers and that sort of thing, and it will kind of pare your track down to fewer points. And so that is one feature that has really helped those sorts of situations. So I'd be interested to know if she's still having that issue with the newer version of the app, and maybe that's something, if it's still happening, to provide some feedback to Nature Counts on that front.
Great. Okay, there was a question about the kickoff event in Countville and the schedule, and Kaylin added the link to that event on the webpage in the chat. So if anyone is interested, please check that out. Another question about, is there a way to figure out what species are expected in a square?
Yes, there is. And so on Nature Counts as well, I can always go ahead and maybe share my screen again. So if you're already on Nature Counts, I've logged in over here. You don't need to log in to see this, just so you know. You can just go to Nature Counts and check it out. One option would be to go to the website under Tools and Resources. We have this Mapping Resources, and you can go to Square Resources from there. So that's one option. Or if you're already on Nature Counts, you can go to My Data and then Atlas Square Resources. It'll take you to the same place. You can either zoom in to where you're looking for if you would like, or if you know the square number, you can search for that too. I'll zoom in since I'm assuming most people have not memorized square numbers as Mike and I have. So I'll just zoom in. I'll just zoom in on Hamilton. It's always Hamilton. Once you've zoomed in enough to see this square boundary on the map, it will give you all of these tools that are available for the square on the right-hand side of the screen. One of them is a PDF map, and then you know, some point count coordinates. At the very bottom, there's a square summary sheet. So if you go ahead and click on that, you'll get this. And it looks a little complicated at first look, but in reality, it's just a bunch of species names. And then there's a PREV code, which is actually the previous atlas, which is Atlas-2 from 2001 to 2005. There's a code column, which is the current breeding evidence code. And then there's a percentage column, which is the percentage of squares in the region that it has been found in. So you can use this to look at the previous column, essentially what was found here in Atlas-2. And that's a really good place to start to say, oh, maybe that's what I should look for this time, because obviously it was here last time, and unless something drastic has happened in your square, of course. So Canada goose, of course, was found in the last atlas, and again during this atlas. Mute swan was found in the last atlas, but not yet during Atlas-3, and so on and so forth. The species that are underlined are ones that have been found in more than 50% of squares in the region, but have not yet been found in that square. So that's another way that you can look at to see, like, okay, maybe this is a species that I might want to look for if it's found in a lot of squares in the region, but not yet found in this particular square. So this is what the main resources that I use when I go out atlasing to try to figure out what I'm looking for. And yeah, I don't know if Mike has anything else he wants to add to that. No? Okay.
Great, thanks, Keelan. Question from Catherine: has downloading point count locations been simplified?
There's a number of ways you can do it. So the easiest is to use the Nature Counts app. I'm going to keep telling you that for almost every question. If you're using the Nature Counts app, if you select point count as your survey protocol, then you can open up the map and you'll see where all the point counts are. It's saved right on your phone. Don't have to have any other tool. But we do have a lot of other options. So you can download it as a spreadsheet of the coordinates, and all the other options you can get at the way Kaylin was just showing you how to find the square summary sheet. All those other things that it was listing there under the square are things like the coordinates. You can load them in a format that you can make a Google map. You can download them as there's a PDF map that you can download that's got the locations on them and it's georeferenced. There we go. Thanks, Kaylin. So there's the PDF map. You can download the coordinates in a bunch of different formats. So it's really comes down to personal preference. I feel like everybody I talk to has a different preference on how they navigate squares and get to point counts. My personal favorite is to download the Google Earth format and make myself my own custom Google map for the square I'm going to, and then I can have it on my phone and use the navigation that's built in. But I use the PDF maps a lot too. So it's really up to you. We've got on our YouTube channel, we've got kind of demos of how to do all those things.
Great, thanks, Mike. Question from Sandra: will Nature Counts accept early records of breeding evidence if you see it prior to the safe date?
Absolutely. So on that Nature Counts app, when it tells you you're outside of the breeding season, it tells you, if you click for more information, it basically says this is, you're outside of the safe dates, the main breeding season, and migrants could be present. So use some caution, and then you'd want to add some comments to your record to sort of justify why you're doing that. And that's all. It's not gonna prevent you from doing it, but if you don't put any notes, then you might get a follow-up from one of the data reviewers to ask you some questions about that record.
Thank you. Next question is: how do I know where help is needed?
That's a great question. So our number one suggestion would be talk to your regional coordinator. They're the number one person in that area. They know it intimately. They know every single square. They have specific names for every single square. They really know their region. So you should definitely chat with them, and they will be able to direct you to where help is needed. And especially, if you have any special interests like special surveys or that sort of thing, they can direct you there as well. My second suggestion would be to check out our coverage map. So on our coverage map, I guess I can go ahead, I can share that again. I'm just sharing screen. So on Nature Counts, if you go to Explore and you look at the coverage map, you can show the Atlas regions to get a better sense of where you are, and the square assignments. And then you can choose a layer. So I'm just going to look at the number of hours, so how much general atlasing has been done. And that will show you how much atlasing has been done in each area. The legend is down at the bottom, so effort in terms of hours. The darker squares have more effort. And you can see, in and around Algonquin, all of these light squares or, squares without color at all have less effort. Same as you get kind of like further north or in Norfolk, Lambton, here on Perth. All of these dots are squares that are assigned. That doesn't mean that you can't go atlasing there. It just means for some of the more advanced things like point counts and that sort of thing that someone has committed to doing that. You can go atlasing from anywhere, but again, talk to your RCs to figure out how you can help and how you can have the most impact.
Okay, next question is there a level of bird knowledge that I need to have in order to be an atlaser?
And this kind of ties into the last one too. No, there's the short answer. There's lots of opportunities for everyone. You can atlas at your level. You can participate in surveys like OWL surveys that you only need to know a few species if you're not confident with your bird ID just yet. You can use recorders and that sort of thing. And as you increase your bird ID knowledge, you could do point counts on your own or marsh bird surveys. There's opportunity for everyone. And that's another great reason, to talk to your RCs about what's needed in the region.
Fantastic. How about someone who doesn't have data on their phone? How would they collect information for the atlas?
Yeah, it's no problem. So you can use your notebook or print off data sheets from the Atlas website, and then come home and enter them through the website. But the Nature Counts app works great when you're offline. You just obviously can't submit any data, but it will be able to collect all the information for you, just like you would if you did have cell service or a data connection. And then when you finish that checklist, you just have the option to save it as a draft checklist. You can try submitting it. Your phone won't let you because it has no way to do so. And it'll just give you a message saying, we don't have data right now, so we've saved this checklist to your drafts. And then when you get back to wherever you have a data connection, then you can go back to your draft checklists and submit them afterwards. So nice and easy with the Nature Counts app.
Definitely. Okay. Is the number of hours of general atlasing for each year, or is it just 20 hours for the entire atlas?
Yeah, that's a good one. We get that question a lot, probably because we don't explain it very well. But it is 20 hours over the course of the 5 years, so not nearly as daunting as doing 20 hours every single year. So if you were starting from the start of the atlas, then it's just 4 hours a year, gets you up to those 20 hours. But yeah, it's aiming for the 20 total over the course of the 5 years of the atlas.
Okay, and Catherine's asking, so 1 year to go after this year, correct?
Yep, that's right. So we have this season, and then we have all of 2025. It ends at the end of December 2025. So we're nearing the end. Time flies, but yeah, I'm really excited to see everything that this atlas reveals for sure.
Absolutely. Okay, I think that is all of the questions that we've received tonight. Thank you both for your answers. If anyone has any additional questions that weren't covered tonight, or you want additional details, please go to our Discord server or to the Atlas website. We have an email address, which is atlas@birdsontario.org. A reminder that this recording will be posted on the Atlas YouTube channel, so you will be able to refer to it at any time. Just a reminder of some upcoming events. Kaylin mentioned the square bashes earlier, so please go to the website for details on those. We hope to see you at Pinery, Bon Echo, or Mikisew. There are also a number of pre-planned canoe trips that are now posted on the website. They cover a number of critical gap areas remaining in the southern field, regions 16 to 32, that could really use your help if you're into that sort of thing. So go to birdsontario.org/canoe trips. I will put that in the chat as well. Oh, thanks, Kaylin. And we're really excited to be kicking off the year with 2 in-person events run by Atlas staff. Events are going to be held in Barrie on April 20th and Kemptville on April 21st. Again, please check out our website for details on those, but we hope to see as many people in person at those events as possible this year. Do you have anything else to add, Kaylin and Mike?
No, you did a great job. Thanks so much, Tanya. You've been really wonderful tonight emceeing for us, and we really appreciate your time and the time of everyone that came to watch us and listen to us chat about the Atlas.
You're very welcome, and thanks for everyone who joined us tonight. I hope you have some wonderful time atlasing early in the season and as things ramp up with migration. So thanks everybody. Have a great night, and hope to see you at an event soon.
Great. Thanks so much. Happy Atlasing. Bye-bye.